The hotel room smelled faintly of detergent and old carpet, a neutral scent meant to forget itself. Ethan stood just inside the door, his suitcase still upright by his side, as if he might change his mind and leave. The city outside the window pulsed with distant headlights and muffled horns, alive in a way he no longer felt. He had checked in under his real name, paid with his own card, yet everything about this night felt hidden. Before he could unpack, his phone vibrated. "Marcus, I'm downstairs." Ethan closed his eyes. That single sentence carried weeks of restraint, months of unspoken tension, and a choice he had been circling without naming. He typed a reply, "Room 914, then placed the phone face down, as if refusing to look might delay the consequences. They had met 6 months earlier at a conference neither of them wanted to attend. Ethan remembered Marcus's laugh first, uncontrolled, genuine, the kind that made other people turn around and smile without knowing why. What began as casual conversations over bad coffee slowly turned into long walks after sessions, then late-night messages that stretched past midnight. They talked about music, childhood memories, regrets they hadn't admitted to anyone else. Somewhere along the way, Ethan stopped telling himself it was harmless. Marcus had been honest, at least in fragments. He had mentioned Daniel early on, always referred to as "my partner," never as a husband, never with warmth or resentment. Just a fact. Ethan told himself that facts didn't hurt people, actions did. As long as nothing crossed a visible line, he could pretend there was no betrayal taking shape. The knock came sooner than expected. Ethan's chest tightened as he opened the door. Marcus stood there, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes searching Ethan's face as if checking for permission to exist in this space. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hallway light framed Marcus in a way that felt intimate and wrong all at once. "Hey," Marcus said quietly. "Hey," Ethan replied, stepping aside. The door closed with a soft click that sounded far too final. Marcus looked around the room, then back at Ethan, a nervous smile forming. "I almost didn't come up." Ethan nodded. "I almost didn't book the room." They shared a brief, uneasy laugh. It dissolved quickly, leaving behind the truth neither wanted to voice. Marcus removed his jacket and draped it over the chair, a small domestic gesture that unsettled Ethan more than if he had crossed the room and touched him. This wasn't supposed to feel familiar. They sat on opposite sides of the bed, careful to keep space between them. Marcus leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I've been thinking about this all day," he said. "About us being here." Ethan studied Marcus's profile, the tension in his jaw, the way his confidence slipped when emotions crept in. "Me too," he admitted. "That's what scares me." Marcus looked up. "You know I don't want to hurt anyone." The words hung heavy in the air. Ethan heard what Marcus didn't say. "But I might anyway, I know," Ethan replied, though he wasn't sure that made it better. Silence settled between them, not awkward but charged. Outside, a siren wailed briefly, then faded. Marcus finally broke the quiet. "Daniel thinks I'm on a business trip," he said, voice low. "I didn't lie exactly. I just didn't tell the whole truth." Ethan felt something twist inside him, guilt mixed with a strange sense of importance. Being the secret meant being chosen, even temporarily. That realization scared him more than Marcus's presence. "You could still leave," Ethan said, offering the escape he wasn't sure he wanted Marcus to take. Marcus shook his head slowly. "If I leave now, I'll keep wondering. And I'm tired of wondering." Ethan stood, moving toward the window, putting physical distance between them to steady himself. He saw his reflection in the glass, older than he felt, carrying the weight of decisions made in quiet rooms. He had spent years wanting to be wanted, mistaking attention for connection. Now, standing here, he understood how dangerous that hunger could be. When he turned back, Marcus was watching him with an intensity that felt like a question. Ethan answered it by sitting beside him, close enough to feel warmth, not close enough to touch. The restraint felt deliberate, almost ceremonial. "Whatever happens," Ethan said softly, "this changes things." Marcus nodded. "I know." They didn't reach for each other. Not yet. But as the city lights flickered through the window and the night stretched ahead, both men understood they had already crossed a line, one drawn not by bodies, but by hearts. And neither of them knew how to step back without losing something they hadn't even fully claimed. The distance Ethan had carefully placed between himself and Marcus did not last. It dissolved not with a touch, but with a look, Marcus turning slightly, their knees almost brushing, his voice quieter than before. The hotel room felt smaller now, as if the walls were leaning in to listen. "I don't do this," Marcus said, rubbing his hands together. "Sneaking around. Being someone I don't recognize." Ethan swallowed. "Then why are you here?" Marcus hesitated, and in that pause Ethan heard the truth forming before the words arrived. "Because with you," Marcus said, "I don't feel invisible." The confession landed heavily. Ethan had learned long ago that loneliness could exist even in shared spaces, even in long relationships. Still, hearing Marcus say it stirred something dangerous, a belief that he was not just a distraction, but a remedy. He hated himself a little for how much he wanted that to be true. They talked instead of touching, as if conversation could delay the inevitable. Marcus spoke about Daniel with a careful honesty, choosing his words like fragile objects. He described a life built on routine, shared bills, shared meals, shared silence. "We don't fight," Marcus said, almost apologetically. "But we don't really talk anymore either." Ethan listened, aware of the line he was crossing simply by being present. He didn't ask questions that would paint Daniel as a villain. He didn't want that excuse. "Comfort can be a kind of cage," Ethan said, more to himself than to Marcus. Marcus looked at him then, really looked. "That's exactly it." The room grew warmer, or perhaps Ethan just noticed it more. Marcus shifted closer, the space between them now deliberate rather than accidental. Ethan could feel the tension in his own body, the pull between restraint and desire. This wasn't lust in its simplest form. It was recognition. And recognition, Ethan knew, could be far more destructive. "I keep telling myself this is just a moment," Marcus said. "That it doesn't have to mean anything." "And does that help?" Ethan asked. Marcus smiled sadly. No, the honesty stripped away whatever illusions Ethan had been clinging to. This was no longer a theoretical betrayal. It was unfolding, minute by minute, in the shared breath between them. When Marcus reached out, his hand stopping just short of Ethan's arm, Ethan didn't move away. The stillness itself became a choice. Their closeness felt intimate without being explicit, foreheads nearly touching, voices barely above whispers. Ethan thought of all the times he had wanted to be chosen openly, without shadows or locked doors. Being wanted in secret was a poor substitute, yet here he was, accepting it. A sudden vibration shattered the fragile calm. Marcus stiffened as his phone lit up on the bedside table. Ethan didn't need to see the name to know who it was. Marcus stared at the screen, jaw tightening, the color draining from his face. "Daniel," Marcus said quietly. The phone stopped buzzing, but the damage was done. The hotel room felt different now, less like a refuge, more like evidence. Marcus picked up the phone, then set it down again without answering. He stood and walked toward the window, mirroring the move Ethan had made earlier, as if they were unconsciously trading places. "I can't keep pretending this is nothing," Marcus said, his back turned. "Every time I lie, it gets heavier." Ethan rose slowly. "Then don't lie." Marcus let out a bitter laugh. "If I tell the truth, I lose everything." "You're already losing something," Ethan replied, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. Marcus turned, eyes glistening but controlled. "I didn't expect to feel this much," he admitted. "That's what scares me." Ethan understood too well. Feelings had a way of demanding accountability. They couldn't be neatly folded away like clothes after a trip. Whatever happened next would ripple outward, touching people who hadn't agreed to be part of this story. Marcus reached for Ethan's hand at last, squeezing briefly, an acknowledgement rather than a promise, then let go. "I need to figure out what I'm doing," he said. "For real?" Ethan nodded, the weight of that statement settling into him. This night had already changed them, whether they wanted it to or not. As Marcus picked up his jacket, hesitation written into every movement, Ethan realized that the most painful part wasn't the possibility of losing Marcus. It was knowing that whatever choice Marcus made next, none of them would walk away untouched. Morning arrived without relief. Adam woke before the alarm, his thoughts already active, circling the same uneasy truths he had avoided the night before. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that invited reflection rather than rest. He lay still, listening to Mark's breathing beside him, and felt the sharp contrast between physical closeness and emotional distance. Nothing visible had changed, yet Adam sensed that the foundation beneath their marriage had shifted. Over breakfast, Adam spoke less than usual. Mark noticed but said nothing, perhaps out of habit, perhaps out of fatigue. Their routines continued as they always had, coffee poured, doors closed, goodbyes exchanged, but the familiarity felt fragile now, like something that could crack under a careless word. Adam watched Mark leave and wondered how long silence could serve as protection before it turned into betrayal. Ethan stayed out of sight for the next few days, which only intensified Adam's awareness of him. Absence proved more disruptive than presence. Adam replayed their conversation, the careful way Ethan had offered him a choice rather than an escape. That restraint haunted him. It made Adam question his own motives, the quiet longing that had drawn him towards someone who asked so little yet seemed to understand so much. When they finally met again, it was unplanned. Adam was returning home early, his thoughts scattered, when he found Ethan in the hallway. There was no pretense this time, no small talk to soften the moment. They exchanged a brief greeting, and Adam felt the tension settle between them, familiar and unresolved. Ethan spoke first, his tone steady but sincere. He acknowledged the risk of what they were doing, the cost it could carry for both of them. He said he didn't want to become a secret that damaged a life already under strain. The words struck Adam with unexpected force, because they echoed the doubts he had tried to ignore. Ethan wasn't offering romance or rescue, only honesty. Adam responded with more truth than he intended. He admitted that the distance in his marriage had left him feeling invisible, that being seen again had felt like a reminder of something he'd lost. He did not excuse his feelings, but he did not deny them either. Saying the words aloud made them real in a way thoughts never had. They parted without resolution, but not without understanding. Adam returned to his apartment aware that clarity, not temptation, was now his greatest challenge. He could no longer pretend that nothing had happened. Emotional lines, once crossed, did not reset simply because no one was watching. That evening, Mark asked a question he had avoided for weeks. He wanted to know whether Adam was still happy. The simplicity of it left Adam unprepared. He considered offering reassurance, the practiced answer that would preserve peace, but something in him resisted. For the first time in a long while, Adam chose honesty, even though it frightened him. He spoke carefully, acknowledging the distance between them without assigning blame. Mark listened in silence, his expression unreadable. When Adam finished, the space between them felt heavier, but also more real. Mark admitted he had felt the change too, though he hadn't known how to name it. There was pain in his voice, but also a willingness to confront what they had both avoided. The conversation did not resolve their marriage, but it altered its direction. They agreed to take time, to talk more, to listen differently, to stop pretending that stability alone was enough. Adam did not mention Ethan by name, but the shadow of that truth lingered, unspoken yet present. Later, alone in his room, Adam reflected on the choices unfolding before him. Infidelity, he realized, was not defined by a single act, but by the gradual turning away from one truth toward another. He stood at a crossroads shaped by desire, honesty, and consequence, unsure which path would demand more courage. As night settled in, Adam understood that change had already begun, not because of what had happened, but because of what could no longer be ignored. Whatever came next would require him to decide who he wanted to be, not in secret, but in the open light of accountability. The room was the same, the silence familiar, yet Adam sensed that the story was far from over. Time did not erase Michael from my life, but it changed the way he occupied it. Months passed, then a year, and the sharp intensity of what we had nearly become softened into something quieter, more distant. He returned to being a familiar presence at family gatherings, his laughter measured, his conversations polite. To anyone watching, nothing was different. To me, everything was that I noticed how carefully Michael avoided being alone with me. He positioned himself near others, excused himself early, redirected conversations when they drifted too personal. What once might have felt like rejection now felt like intention. He was protecting a boundary he had chosen, and I learned to respect it. My father, David, remained blissfully unaware. He spoke of Michael with the same warmth, the same trust, and I never interrupted him. Carrying that silence was not easy, but it was necessary. Not every truth needs an audience, especially when revealing it would only cause harm without healing. What surprised me most was how the absence of secrecy began to change me. Without the constant tension of waiting for a message or measuring a glance, my thoughts slowly returned to myself. I started asking different questions, not about what Michael felt, but about what I wanted from my own life. That I began dating, cautiously at first. Each connection taught me something new, not all of it comfortable. I recognized patterns I had once ignored, moments where I mistook attention for intimacy. When that happened, I stepped back. The lesson Michael left me with was not how to love, but how not to disappear inside longing. One afternoon, long after the intensity had faded, Michael and I shared a brief conversation alone. It was unplanned, unavoidable. He asked how I was doing, and this time, the question felt safe. I told him the truth. That I was finding my way. That I was learning to be honest with myself, even when it cost me comfort. That he nodded, a faint smile crossing his face. There was relief there, and gratitude. Not for what we had shared, but for what we had chosen not to become. That moment closed something quietly between us. That I realized then that some relationships do not end with conflict or confession. They end with understanding. The absence of drama did not make our story insignificant. It made it real. Looking back, I no longer frame that chapter of my life as a mistake. It was a confrontation with desire, with boundaries, with the consequences of emotional infidelity. I learned that love without clarity creates shadows, and living in those shadows slowly reshapes who you are. Michael had been a mirror, not a destination. Through him, I saw the parts of myself that needed acknowledgement, not indulgence. And once seen, they could no longer be ignored. My life did not transform overnight. Growth rarely announces itself that way. It unfolded gradually, through better choices, through restraint, through learning when to walk away before harm takes root. Sometimes, late at night, I think about how easily everything could have collapsed into something destructive. How one different choice might have rewritten many lives. That awareness keeps me grounded. It reminds me that integrity is often built from the decisions no one else ever sees. If there is a truth I carry forward, it is this: not every powerful connection is meant to be pursued. Some exist to reveal who we are, then release us back to ourselves, and in that release, painful and necessary, a new beginning quietly waits.